Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this, your very special day, talking about your new social work law and the role of social workers in your society. I'm absolutely delighted to bring greetings to the Minister, social work colleagues, educators and researchers from your 1 million colleagues around the world who are now members of the International Federation of Social Workers. It is important that you consider the role that social workers play in society, because in building the confidence of the people who form the social capital, the workforce of the country, it helps to build stronger economies. And when people are living in healthy and inclusive societies, they are much more peaceful communities for people to live and grow up in. Social workers have had a long tradition of working with people who've been displaced, either physically or emotionally, from their families, communities and their known environments. This might be as a result of war, dealing with a disaster like a plane crash or earthquake, working with someone who's been abused or is struggling with living with a physical, learning or mental difficulty. This goes back a long way, and your predecessors were leaders in the international social work scene way back in the 1920s, when in 1926, 5,000 social workers met in Paris for the first global meeting of what was to then become the International Federation of Social Workers. And it worked very successfully until World War II, when everything became quite difficult. And social workers working behind the scenes, rescuing children, working with people who had suffered huge bereavements and loss of their homes and their communities, were key personnel in rebuilding societies after the Second World War. We have Irina Sendler, who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize quite recently, who was a Polish social worker working in the ghetto in Poland, rescuing Jewish children and placing them with families, but securing their identity by burying their birth certificates and papers in jam jars in the forest. So these children were able to retain their identity even through the trauma of war. After the war, your colleagues in Prague contacted social workers around the world to try and renew those international contacts and to share information about rebuilding their societies. There's a very important letter in the archives of IFSW, written in 1946, that gives an indication of this kind of commitment, not only to learning about what happens in your own country, but about sharing that knowledge internationally. And I was very privileged in 1991 to meet with Dr. Vera Novotna and Dr. Alice Slukin, who'd both practiced in Prague in the 1930s, talking about their journey through the war and through the communist period, and in the early 90s embarking on yet another political change, that they were able to focus on what they had learnt and what might be useful to us moving into the next 20 to 30 years. In terms of working with people to rebuild societies. We have much to be proud of in our history, but we also have many challenges to look forward to in the future. And not least of these are the economic issues that people face and how we help people through the austerity that has been sweeping through Europe in the last decade. So what do we bring to our communities as social workers. We bring the deep-rooted foundation based on a comprehensive knowledge of the scientific disciplines that we need to use in order to make our analysis with people about how to move forward. These disciplines include a knowledge of medical complications, psychological, environmental. We have to have a knowledge of the law, we have to have a knowledge of governance, we have to have a knowledge of human rights, but we have to also have the ability to work with people in these complex areas of their lives. What we do is we work with people to analyse the situation that they're in. We then work out a plan with them. We have a co-production with them, which will result in a positive, sustainable change that will leave them in a better place. And we do this through what I call the social relationship, which we develop with people. And as a result of that social relationship, we are often the catalyst towards that change happening for people in a very positive and constructive way. But there's also a period when we reach the end of that relationship, when the person or the community has achieved control of their own lives, and they can now begin to contribute very positively to their own communities and take their learning on into their future lives. So this building of social capital is absolutely critical to building our societies. So social workers are generally lateral thinkers who work with people at any stages of their life, from the cradle to the grave. They have to understand the complex matrix in which people live. They have to be adaptable. But they also have to be very focused on helping troubled or distressed people find a way forward and their own sense of social justice. I just want to talk a minute or two about IFSW, which has been an NGO at the UN since the 1950s for work with displaced people. We're currently engaged in a 10-year project with our colleagues in the International Council of Social Welfare and the Schools of Social Work. This is called the Global Agenda for Social Work and Social Development. We've set up observatories in our 5 regions: Europe, Africa, Asia Pacific, North America, and Latin America and the Caribbean. The European Observatory is based at Lund University in Sweden, and that is where we would like you to link with in terms of providing information about what social work in your countries contributes to social development. Within that 10 years, we have 5 themes, one every 2 years. And the current theme is the respect and dignity of people, which was the theme for World Social Work Day. This is a very important principle at the core of social work. And you can find out more about how you can contribute to this global agenda by going to our website. And the contributions that you make will be presented to the UN and the World Bank and WHO. So we will be providing information to influence the policies that happen at global level about social development. But this also happens at European level through the EU and the work of IFSW Europe, but it also happens from the professional associations of social workers when they meet with the politicians in their own countries to talk about what can help sustain good progress within communities. Today, your focus is on the new social work law. This is really important. It's important to understand the role that we have with individuals, families, and communities. But we also share with that a responsibility in the wider political context contributing our knowledge of what works in working together for positive change to build inclusive, healthy societies. Many countries are now developing a social work law, and a recent example comes from Argentina, where they used the internationally agreed definition of social work from the conference in 2014 in Melbourne, which is on our website, to help guide what should actually be in that law. And I think this was a really good starting point to think about what it is that our profession contributes and why there needs to be a law around this kind of work. One of the problems that social work has had over a number of years is many people have described themselves as social workers without having a professional qualification. And this has not helped in terms of understanding the very key role that we in fact have in our societies. And I think that one of the things that a social work law does is to help the society understand that to be a social worker, you have to have the skills, knowledge and expertise to be able to intervene properly in people's lives. It's a protection for people in our communities that they are not exposed to people who cannot make a positive contribution. In my own country, we have a social work law that does define what we can do, but it also defines the responsibilities that are delegated to us by the state, and these are states' responsibilities, and this is about care and protection. And one of the things that I do feel that it is important is when people through the legal systems are facing some kind of statutory intervention in their lives, whether it's a child who needs to be cared for because the parents are failing to provide that care and protection, or it's somebody who has a mental health difficulty that puts themselves or other people at risk from harm, or it's somebody who might be facing a prison sentence and that might have an effect on their children, on their families, on their work, then I think that there is a role for social workers which is defined in our law as providing a professional assessment of the impact of that kind of deprivation of someone's human rights through depriving them of their liberty or where they stay, that has to come from a skilled and knowledgeable social worker. So I think that not only do we contribute to communities, but we also have a really important and hefty responsibility in terms of making sure that people's human rights are respected. This is why we have to be educated to a high university level, and this is one of the criteria for the membership of the International Federation of Social Workers. I hope you have a good day when you will come to some good conclusions about the role of social work within your society and what it is that those in positions of governance can do to support you in what is a very difficult and often harrowing work that we undertake as social workers. But it's also an enjoyable profession in that when you see someone with whom you have worked blossom and actually reach a point when they can really contribute to their community, you know you've got success. And those in political positions need to recognise that when you've got happy people, you have people who are confident to go out to work, who can then go on to contribute to the economic growth of the country. Thank you, enjoy your day, and I look forward to meeting you at some point in the future in the International Federation. Thank you.